well, Stalin and Trotsky don't get along, so everybody who's connected with Trotsky, including Bela Kun, they're targeted for purges. Trotsky actually lived to 1940 before he took an ice axe to the back of the head in Mexico. Kun doesn't last that long. He's executed in 1938. And the Hungarian communists who wanted to know what happened to this guy didn't find out until 1989. Okay? After the end of the Cold War, as the Cold War is ending, actually. Okay? So that's what both political factions on the right and left, and all the other ones in between, are facing there. Okay? No matter who you are, you have to deal with the Treaty of Trianon and the fact that you've lost 2/3 of your territory. And in Hungary, they have a saying, and basically translates as "no, no, never." In other words, nobody wants to have that happen. Nobody can afford it. Okay, the Czechs get land back, mostly Slovakia. Okay, the big yellow part here, they lose that. The Romanians get this. Everybody else gets land. And see, it's a form of national humiliation for a power that just a few years before, during the Empire, really called the shots where other people were concerned, right? God, how much more time do I have? I'm going to try to wrap this up. World War II, okay, and I'm doing just what my history profs always did, and I hated it. You talk about the background, and then you talk about the effects, and you say, oh, read about the war in your book. See, I'm a military historian. That annoys me. So I'm going to annoy you. So you've probably read in that short history of Hungary from 1941 to present or whatever. Now the Second Hungarian Army is committed to the Eastern Front along with a big Romanian force in World War II, and they don't do real well. Now, if you're the Hungarians or the Romanians, you're going to say, well, it's because the Germans didn't support us. We didn't. They took all of our trucks. We had nothing. If you're the Germans, you're going to say it's because the Hungarian army couldn't punch its way out of a paper bag. These two diametrically opposed opinions. Anyway, especially at the Don counteroffensive in '44, the Second Army collapses, and Admiral Horthy, who's still in charge of the government back in Budapest, makes a decision based on what he figures is ill treatment of the Hungarian army by the major Axis partner there. Plus, it looks more general terms like Germany's going to lose the war by this time. Propaganda only does you so much good when you see the enemy's army closing in and more of your people aren't coming home for leave. Okay, and there are mysterious coverage gaps in the newspaper. You catch on to stuff like that. So Horthy wants to throw in the towel. He makes a deal with the Russians. Okay, basically makes an armistice with them. The Germans find out about it. Actually, the Germans had spies. They found out about it as fast as Horthy was doing it. So they replace him. They basically keep him under house arrest in Bavaria for a while. And they install what's called the Arrow Cross Party, which is a pro-Nazi party in Hungary that, the Arrow Cross guys had been around, but they had kind of been under the surface because under the Horthy regime, they were actually illegal. And of course, now that's one point in Horthy's favor when they haul him up before these judges at Nuremberg. You can say, well, look, I made that party illegal, and they didn't really come to power until after all those mean Nazis carried me away to a Bavarian farmhouse, right? Okay, so Horthy's replaced, and that's when the Hungarian Holocaust happens, or the Hungarian part of the Holocaust happens. It's only from really October '44 on. That you have, 400,000 Hungarian Jews affected by this. A vast majority of them murdered in Auschwitz-Birkenau, which I guess you're going to go see. Okay? Because maybe you've read about Raoul Wallenberg. He managed to rescue some of them by giving Swedish papers and putting them up in houses all over Budapest. Yeah, one time he actually jumps on a train that's about to take off for Auschwitz, and he manages to get a bunch of people who were condemned, you know, actually doomed, off of that train. You know, this stuff happens fairly late in the war. Now, as far as the overall effect on Hungary and the Hungarians, it's like anywhere else in Eastern Europe. You know, the economy, which wasn't too good to begin with, is now shot. Okay, the Russians have occupied, and of course the Russians demand reparations. You understand? You were against us for most of the war, so you're going to have to pay us a fine. And of course, if the economy's down the tubes, the Hungarians can't fork over gold bullion or something that's exchangeable currency. What happens with the Russian policy, the same thing that they did in the eastern half of Germany and in Czechoslovakia, they'll start taking out any raw materials from that country that they think are saleable, useful in their industry, whatever. Okay? Now, it all compounds, because the more stuff they take out of Hungary, the fewer jobs you're going to have for Hungarians. So you have, you know, even if you win a war, you always have economic dislocation after a war. You know, you've got to understand that. Okay? And in World War II, only the American economy really came out ahead of the game. Even, you know, the Brits were on the winning side. The British economy didn't recover until about 1960, and that's probably a generous estimate. Okay? You know, the common market starts at 57. They still weren't recovered by 57. Okay? So if in Hungary, where you're on the losing side, it's nasty. Mega inflation, probably worse mega inflation than the Weimar Republic in Germany. Okay? So right after the war, 45, 46, the Hungarians, with their economy really on the skids, nevertheless, they attempt a multi-party republic. Okay? They put it together. Now, the main party is a socialist party. They're called the Socialist Democrats, but they're non-communist. In other words, yeah, we believe in state ownership of major industries, state control of the banks, but we don't want Moscow calling the shots. And we certainly don't believe that after the dictatorship of the proletariat will come this miraculous utopia where you don't need a government. Okay? Which most people who are socialists don't believe in doctrinaire Marxist-Leninist dogma like that. Okay? So that's, you can call that phase one post-war Hungarian history. It doesn't last too long. Okay? Because what you have is a multi-party system, and Stalinist communists are one of the parties, okay? Led by a guy named Matthias, or Matthias, if you're speaking in English, Rákosi. Okay? I got his mug on the board. Picture of Rákosi. This is great because look at this dude. He looks like a nasty character. You know who Hans Frank is? Okay? The guy that hanged at Auschwitz. He was kind of like Hans Frank. Okay? If you made a top 10 list of really nasty, heavy Eastern Bloc strongmen, this guy would be at the top of the list. Okay? Nobody knows how many thousands of people were killed between 1948 and 1955. Okay? The estimates, the number you see most often is 7,000 party officials. Okay? 7,000 party officials, not 7,000 people. That's in a country of 10 million. Okay? So nobody knows how many thousands more. A lot of sources say that at least 350,000 Hungarians were either killed, jailed, or otherwise affected by this purge. Rákosi is a real heavy. Now, he only has 17% support in the legislature. So, how is he going to take over in 48 with such a heavy hand if he's only got this thin slice of support? Okay, and here's where you get what's known in Hungarian history as salami tactics. Okay, basically what this guy does is he's as shrewd as he is vicious. Okay, he just kind of whittles away at the majority a little bit at a time, getting only the concessions he thinks he can get. Getting a minister appointed here, a minister appointed there. Oh yeah, I understand we're not the majority. We don't run a majority in the cabinet. But then he pulls a shrewd move. He says, yeah, you can have most of the cabinet members, but we want the Ministry of the Interior. That's key. Because this next guy in the rogues gallery he looks like Adam Carolla. That's Laszlo Rajek. Okay? He becomes Minister of the Interior under Rákosi, and if you're Minister of the Interior in Hungary, and this is why he wanted that post, you're head of the AVH. Okay? You're head of the Hungarian secret police. And once the Rákosi people have control of the secret police, they can basically kill anybody they want, even though they only have 17% of the seats in the legislature. Okay? And so that's what you have basically going on. Between 49 and 53, you can call it the second Red Terror if you want, and it's a heck of a lot bigger than the first Red Terror. Okay? Huge numbers of people affected. Now, the next phase, if you're doing this in phases, basically 53 to 55, you have what looks like it's going to be a turn for the better. You already know Stalin kicks the bucket in 53. Okay, that's pretty much wraps up a lot of things that Stalin had going on that even other people in the Politburo thought were over the top. The Jewish doctors plot, stuff like that. Pretty clearly, Stalin was getting a little more paranoid than usual as he got older. Okay, so you have what looks like it's going to be a thaw. In fact, in Cold War history, they call it the thaw. And one of the things that happens in Soviet policy is that the Communist International says, okay, what we're going to do in these subject republics, now those Eastern European states that are in a buffer zone, we're going to have what they call shared responsibility. I'm not going to give it to you in Russian because I can't pronounce the Russian. Okay, so instead of having one guy, Matyas Rákosi, in there calling all the shots, they're going to give the premier a little bit more say. Rákosi's still going to stay on as the party chairman. Okay, but they bring in a guy named Imre Nagy. Okay, it looks like Nagy, but in Hungary it's Nagy. Anglos like me grew up in Cleveland. If you called somebody named Nagy, they'd correct you. Okay? And I'm going to quote from him because he's kind of like the Thomas Paine of the Hungarian Revolution. He's a very articulate guy. He's kind of like Dubček later on in Czechoslovakia. He's an idealist. Okay? He's not an astute politician, which is the fact that he wasn't an astute politician probably cost him his life, okay? But he's an idealist, and basically at the core of his idealism is this belief that you can make Marxist-Leninism work, okay? That if you adapt it to local circumstances, not only can you make Marxist-Leninist policy work, but you can even have a multi-party state. And of course, Rákosi, the first thing he did when he could was get rid of the multi-party state and basically force the Social Democrats to join the Hungarian Communists. And if you didn't want to join, well, you didn't have to join, but you might end up at the bottom of a river somewhere. A lot of people did. Okay. Now, the reason he's brought back to power, if he's such a, let me give you a picture of Nagy here. It does look like that. Yeah, he's probably next to Rákosi, the biggest heavy of all. Now here's Imre Nagy. You're going to see. You go to Budapest, you're going to see statues of this guy. Okay? They bring him back, and nobody gets brought back unless people in Moscow want you brought back. Okay? Be sure you understand that. Their conception isn't popular democracy. But by that time, Nagy, who had been prime minister